Okay, so welcome back, listener. This is Mike Sim speaking. Today I've got the pleasure to have a chat with Irache Puebla, director of ASAP Bio, and she's going to tell us something about how the preprint system is working and how she sees the organization of this way of publishing and distributing science to our community in a way which is open as we know the preprint are. So, good evening, Rachel.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for having me. Delighted to talk about preprints as always.
Yeah, it's super great we have meet together in this wonderful video in next to Girona. What is the name?
It's Sant Feliu de Guíxols in Catalonia.
Exact. So if you hear next to us, there's the sea, which is sending big waves on the shore. So don't be surprised with the noise. So Irache, what is ASAP Bio?
Right. So ASAP Bio, we are a non-profit organization that was created in the US, in the United States. And essentially we have a mission to make science communication, specifically for the life sciences, faster and more transparent. So essentially we want to accelerate how science is communicated in biology and associated fields. We try to work towards our mission with two main areas of focus. One is, again, preprints. We try to drive adoption of preprints in the life sciences and make sure that there is a productive use of preprints, so that it's in a responsible way and in a manner useful for researchers. And another thing that we are quite interested in is driving transparency also around peer review. So we're also interested in coupling peer review with preprints and how to open up not only the sharing of research papers, but also how they are reviewed.
So you are not technically a repository for pending archive. You are like having an overview of the system and trying to make people working together, right?
You're absolutely correct. ASAP Bio is not a preprint server. We don't publish papers ourselves. What we do is try to get people together within the community and those who are interested in preprints, who may be researchers, those who work for preprint servers, journals who are interested in open science, and others who also work on the infrastructure and technology, to discuss how we can drive forward with adoption of preprints, what are the best practices that may be helpful, what are the potential challenges that we need to overcome to make sure that, again, more and more researchers can use preprints, but also that they can get visibility and be a useful output within the science communication ecosystem.
Awesome. I mean, as a scientist, I have some experience with the preprints. I'm using bioRxiv, which is one of the most used, but I think you are going to introduce us to other repository. I didn't know actually all the diversity that existed in the field, and so I'm very curious about what is your view of the archive repository organization and how it should be improved. So maybe we go to the next point of the presentation that you made early on, which was very interesting. And what's really struck me is this evolution of the publication with time and the time it takes to publish actually a paper.
Yes, so I think you mentioned the motivation for us to create ASAP Bio. I find it very useful to refer back to that because I think it still applies. Actually, it makes our mission still relevant. But one of the reasons why ASAP Bio was created is that a few years ago, in 2015, a cell biologist who is called Ron Vale was reflecting a little bit as to how long it takes to publish and how long the journal processes, etc. And he decided to go a bit deeper into this and did an analysis of how long it was taking for students at his university. He was based at University of California, San Francisco, to get their first author publication. And what he did is compare a set of students and their publications from the 80s and the same for students in the same university 30 years later. And what he found is that in spite of all the advances in technology, we had now the internet in the 2010s, online journal publishing, submission platforms, etc. It was taking the students from his university 1 extra year to get their first author publication, which was counterintuitive. It was like, what? Everything is going faster online. Why are we seeing this happen? And to try to understand what may be behind that, he also did a similar comparison of publications with a 30-year period of difference in 3 journals, because he wanted to see actually what are the journal publications looking, what are the articles looking. And what he found is that consistently for the most recent publications, for the 3 journals that he looked at, which were Cell, Nature, and the Journal of Cell Biology, the articles that were more recent had consistently a more number of panels, so more data, more results being included, and then on top of that, the supplementary data that now in the online journal version you can also provide. So what the conclusion that he took from this was that the expectations as to what is a publishable unit at a journal had changed and had increased. So now, in order to obtain the favor of the journal editors, you had to carry out more work, for longer, do extra experiments, and produce a larger set of data to meet those expectations to publish in a journal, which he thought that may be part of why we were seeing this delay in publication.
Yeah. So yeah, the time it takes to publish a paper is actually super important, especially for different reasons. We are going to get back to that actually. But if we think in terms of what is a paper which is promoting your work, it's important to have it soon on the market, let's say. And also, if it's super critical information for the rest of humanity, it's better be published very soon. So what do you think should be done?
So what we do at ASAP Bio, and again, it was created, by the way, ASAP Bio was founded by Ron Bale, who had done this analysis, was to say, why don't we find a different way of communicating science where we remove some of those expectations as to what the publishable unit should be. So we think that preprints provide this alternative in the sense that preprint servers are a platform where you can take your manuscript with the amount of results that you consider suitable and ready to share with the community and post it to these online servers where there may be a light touch screening process, but otherwise they do not complete peer review. They will take the paper as provided by the authors. And if it passes this screening, it will be posted publicly in a matter of days. So it means that finding is already available to the community to use it for their own research, to comment on it and provide feedback to the authors, to have exchange of opinions and ideas. And that is essentially, we are not doing away with the peer review system. It's very valuable to have a structural peer review to scrutinize papers and provide validation about their rigor. But this means that we can decouple the communication of the research beyond the expectations of a journal may have, and then do this additional formal or in different formats of peer review to provide us that validation, that scrutiny for the work. But the preprints give you this fast path to the communication to the community.
I see. And it's true in the community more and more we are using preprints. And actually I was surprised in the conference during a small pool was made and not everybody actually is using archives.
Correct, yes. Not everybody's there yet.
Yeah. But hopefully we'll get there. So I was also surprised by this diversity in the repository that exists. So maybe we can list the one you showed up earlier on. I see on the list you've prepared and managed to get. There's the bioarchive, the one I know, but there's a great deal with Research Square. So is it for biology mostly, or?
So Research Square is a preprint server that is run by the company of the same name. But the interesting thing, or I guess the nuance to add to that versus, for example, bioarchive, is the fact that Research Square runs in a partnership with the publisher Springer Nature, and Springer Nature has a number of journals within its portfolio. What they do is, if you submit as an author your manuscript to one of their journals, the journal will offer you for free as a service to post that manuscript on Research Square in parallel. So essentially, that's one of the ways of driving this preprint content in some of these platforms that are preprint servers that operate either in partnership with publishers or that are owned by publishers. That's one of the services that they will offer. But Research Square covers different disciplines, so they cover biology, life sciences, medicine, etc. But they go broader because they will also, again, work in partnership with journals that may go beyond. So, for example, social sciences, physical sciences, etc.
Okay, broad spectrum. Okay, and so in the list there's also medRxiv, preprints.org, PsychArchive, ChemArchive. Okay.
So that what we are seeing now is that in the last few years, there's been quite a frenzy in new preprint servers being created. So some of them have disciplinary focus. Obviously, bioarchive covers biology, medRxiv covers medicine, ChemArchive covers chemistry. Then we have another group of preprint servers that, as I was mentioning, are operated by publishers. So they may not necessarily have a disciplinary focus. Sometimes they do, but it's more of a platform that it works in tandem with the other services and journals that the publisher operates. And then we also see a third group where we are seeing servers that are created by specific communities that want to serve the need of certain groups. So, for example, there are several preprint servers that have, rather than having a disciplinary focus, have a regional or language focus. So, for example, there are servers like Africa Archive that is very much focused on research by African scientists or research done in Africa. You have RIN Archive for Indonesia, and most recently, actually, Japan has also developed their own national preprint server for Japanese research.
So a lot of opportunities actually to spread what we are doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. So focused on the field of microbiology, because we are in the conference on microbiology. We see that actually the habit to put preprints on archive is quite recent. In fact, I mean, you've got a plot as well, which shows that it ramped up, but in 2018, so like 4 years ago. How come it's so late, actually?
I think that one thing to remember is that even though preprints have been used in the physical sciences for 30 years now, in the life sciences, it has taken quite a while for this to pick up. There's been a few initiatives since Archive came to be for the physical sciences, where some groups tried to get preprint servers going for biology, and it didn't quite get traction. And when things started to change, really, was in 2013 when bioRxiv was created by Cole Spring-Howard Laboratory. So it was well received, and there was year-on-year growth at bioRxiv, but they started from quite low number of papers because it was very new, and again, there had been trials before that didn't quite pick up. But what we have seen is that the growth kind of accelerated a little bit towards 2017, 2018. Because what we saw that I think was very influential was around 2016, 2017, several funders signal that they were updating their policies or clarifying their policies to encourage or accept the inclusion of preprints in grant applications or grant reports. So, for example, that was around the period where the NIH in the US indicated that you could cite preprints as part of your interim reports, interim outputs for your grant reports, etc. So I think following that, there were other funders, also, for example, the European Research Council in Europe that created new policies in the same line. So I think this really helped support that adoption that was growing based on community support, and it made it more relevant for many other researchers to pay attention to preprints as a way to prove their productivity and support their grant applications, etc.
Interesting to see that the shift has been done as soon as the institution gave a credit to the work done there.
Policies can be very influential.
Yeah, because of course we like to spread what we produce and share it with most people. But in fact, the energy needed to do such a thing is quite considerable, and having a use for a tool eventually that we are using for the vision of the work is definitely a game changer.
Absolutely, because it provides a very tangible benefit for the individual researchers. I mean, obviously, we can share preprints for the greater good of science, for contributing quickly to knowledge, because it's also a tool for open science, making your work openly available, etc. But certainly, we also understand that researchers operate within a system where they get assessed and there are rewards for certain practices or certain expectations according to the policies of their funders, their institutions, their national systems, etc. So the moment that you have preprints fit into that ecosystem of research evaluation, it becomes a very powerful incentive for researchers to pay attention and start using.
Definitely. So I see also that you work a lot on what should be a good repository to put the preprints, and what actually the user of the repository should be able to get as information, and the formatting of what should be done. So what is your input?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things in the ecosystem is that there are many, as we were discussing, many preprint servers. So, I mean, the practices are still evolving. We are early stages of this because it's all very new and things are changing very quickly. But I guess the part where we as an organization started to pay a little bit of attention to was that when at the start of the pandemic, we saw a surge in the use of preprints because they were a fast way of getting the preliminary data that could inform the response to the pandemic, to getting that to the community quickly, make sure that the decision makers could access it to put measures in place. So for our organization and for those of us who had cared about preprints, it was certainly very positive to see all the sudden attention around preprints and all the interest. But at the same time, we became aware that it was also a very particular situation where preprints were also getting covered in the lay press and were getting discussed in articles, in journalistic pieces that were going to audiences beyond the research community, essentially others who are not necessarily specialists, who can understand the nitty-gritty of what research papers are, how research evidence is based, how do you publish. So for us, we thought it was important to try to have some transparency about how preprints were being presented at the servers, but also to have a conversation with relevant stakeholders in science communication as to how any media stories covering preprints should be presented to the public. What were the words to use and the labels and the little sentences that provided extra clarification that should be included in those media stories. So one of the pieces of this project that we worked on with a number of collaborators from preprint servers and journalists, researchers, institutions, etc. But one of the big areas was that we did a little bit of work on making recommendations for how to present the actual preprints at the server so that whenever some reader would come to, for example, bioRxiv or medRxiv or a Research Square paper, the moment that they go to the preprint, it would be as clear as possible that it was a preprint, that a preprint is different from a journal article because it has not been peer reviewed, and several other labels that would provide that context as to what's the level of scrutiny that has gone on this paper before it published. Does it need additional expert input, which was, for example, one of the things that we highlighted for preprints to highlight the fact that it would be useful to have independent expert opinion on the paper because it has not undergone peer review.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Sometimes we saw some discussion in the broad audience newspaper about facts which has been reported, but since it hasn't been peer reviewed, if you are from the field, you are like, okay, let's see. You keep doubt on that and not a suspicion, but you are aware that things can change. But if you are not, yeah, and but then it goes to the question where who are actually the user of the archive? I mean, is it mostly researchers that are reading the preprints, or do we have some curious person that goes in there? And in the mass of curious person on Earth, I guess many people can have a look and read some preprints. And
I mean, I'm pretty sure there will be curious people out there who are reading preprints, independent of whether they're active researchers or not. My expectation, and from my conversations with active researchers, I expect that the majority of the readers come from, again, active academics, or even actually some of the demographics that are quite make quite a bit of use of preprints, for example, those in the industry, because they may not have subscriptions to journals, etc., and preprints are free to access. But I expect the majority of the target audience of the users as readers are researchers. Having said that, again, by virtue of the fact that they are free to access, in principle, anybody could make use of a preprint. For example, for educational purposes, to develop educational materials. Or another great example of a use is journal clubs that often involve young students, even at undergraduate level, that can participate in the discussion of a paper that is already publicly available. And again, it's pretty much a fluid discussion as to what they think the strengths of the paper are, or what the potential limitations or weaknesses are. So I think that the interesting thing for preprints is that they are free to access by anybody. There are no access restrictions, and they can be used for by a broad range of audiences, which again is something that we need to bear in mind, and it speaks again to the importance of transparency and clarity in labeling, also because they provide an opportunity to teach others who may not be involved in research as to how research works. That is not this great thing that you work on your experiment, on your analysis in your own corner for 3 years, and then suddenly there is this beautiful journal article that is all absolutely truth and immovable, and it will never move from there. It's actually, science is a much more iterative process. Collaborative little pieces of evidence that add on each other, and I think preprints are a great way of showing that. So you can share the first preliminary bit of research, get comments, update it, and keep evolving from there.
Yeah, definitely. It means it's sort of open the car and show what is the engine of making some science and produce some knowledge. I really like this idea, actually. Yeah. And so maybe to rebound on one remarks you made, it's true. I've been really impressed by the fact that I've put recently a preprint on bioRxiv, And I got contacted by a group that I honestly admire. And I was surprised that they were interested by what I've put in there for their journal club. So they were like, yeah, when we are in the lab, we got a regular session, and the journal that we read are actually preprints most of the time. And we got some feedback and more questions for you to answer on your work. And I think it's a super healthy habit to have in the laboratories.
Absolutely. Also, they send you the feedback from the journal club.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I have very warm feelings for journal clubs. I think that's such a great educational opportunity for students, and introducing preprints is fantastic, because the other benefit of having preprints in journal clubs compared to journal articles, apart from obviously the immediacy of it is the very latest research, is the fact that sometimes when you are going to talk about a journal publication, we may have conscious or unconscious biases related to which journal is it, usually depending on what the journal title is or other metrics. While when you are talking about the preprint, is the science for the science.
Yep.
Essentially, there is no labels associated with it. You are going to talk about the science and focus on that with, I would say, a little bit less bias related to the label.
Yeah, definitely. And also, since we are with preprint, we are still in the process of producing a journal paper. It's also a really good opportunity to get in touch with the people in your field, because it seems everything is not engraved in marble. You can still have some question and inquiries actually about the work to make it progress or help yourself. So it's a good opportunity to seize to communicate between each other.
Absolutely. And I think it's just, to me, one of the things that I like most about preprints is that they provide this new channel to facilitate that conversation between researchers, which I think obviously journals provide peer review, etc. It can become a somewhat complicated process and not always the most constructive. While preprints provide this opportunity of saying, okay, here's my work, and I'm posting it publicly because I want others to engage with me about it. So it's an open invitation for others to engage that may lead to suggestions for your work. Or also another thing to highlight, again, in the context of all of this, is that preprint servers allow authors to update their work. So essentially, you can post something that is preliminary, get feedback, do more work, post a new version, and it will all be under the same preprint record. So it's easy to trace the history. So it gives you, it's what you were saying of looking at how the engine works. It opens up the history of that manuscript, of how it has evolved, what engagement has happened before, what happens next.
Yeah. Thinking about communication between the scientists and to exchange on some topic, it happens I've been on social network for researcher, which is ResearchGate, and I see that often there is this kind of very constructive discussion on the topic, and some people which are very active. But actually, this could be definitely brought to a preprint server.
Yes, so in fact, there is a lot of discussion around preprints happening in social media. So, for example, Twitter has been quite influential. I mean, there is a lot of pro-open science researchers doing a great job there promoting preprints as well. So that's great. And I agree. I'm a great believer that all of this public commentary and engagement is hugely important and valuable. And one interesting thing that bioRxiv does, for example, is that they do try to pick up some of those reactions to the preprints that they post. So they have a dashboard actually associated with each preprint, where you can see, they don't cover necessarily every single platform that there is out there, but they do pick up tweets about papers. They have a commenting feature where you can post public comments. And they also collect what they call community reviews, other type of reviews that may come from communities who are commenting on preprints with a certain level of structure. So it may not be like a journal review, but there is a certain level of organization as to how they do it and the format in which they do it. And there are also some actual projects and initiatives that coordinate reviews on preprints. So in similar way as you would expect as a journal, with a person who selects reviewers and then full reviews for the full paper, but those are associated with the preprint. So what bioRxiv does, which I think is a very nice tool that they have through that dashboard, is to capture as much as of those activities as possible. So it can be informal through social media or commented, or it can be more of a formal one through these initiatives such as PR Community in, Review Commons, certain other platforms that what they do is try to garner those reviews for preference. So they try to collect as much of that as possible.
It's super interesting. And so it brings us to the next idea that I think we are going to develop in this podcast is, what about reviews? And what is done actually for reviewers to publish their review linked to the preprint that has been put for the review process online?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways in which we are seeing activity around this. As I mentioned, there are some projects ongoing that I think they are very interesting, and I encourage those of you listening to participate if it's in your field, where we have groups that are organizing the peer review of preprints. So again, a couple of very clear examples are PR Community In, which runs communities for these different disciplines, where they get submissions of preprints. So it's the actual preprint as the author posted it, and then they have a person whom they call a recommender, who coordinates reviews, selects reviewers, and then issues a recommendation. It's not an editorial decision because it's not a journal, but they will issue a recommendation at the end of it. So positive if the evaluations were positive, etc. And those are reviews that, again, the author, if they chose to submit the same paper to a journal later, they can mention to the journal they have these reviews and see if they would like to use them. There is also another initiative called Review Commons, which is a partnership between EMBO and ASAP Bio. And here they coordinate, again, peer reviews on preprints in a journal and agnostic manner, essentially similar process. And in a journal, there is an editor who selects reviews and collects them. But one important element of Review Commons is that they have partnered with a group of non-profit journals who have agreed to reuse the reviews from Review Commons. So essentially, if I'm an author and I submit my preprint to Review Commons will give me some reviews, and then I can choose to go to one of the participating journals with my paper and the reviews, and the journal will give me a decision based on that without starting every time, and I can submit to different journals if it gets rejected. But those are somewhat organized platforms that run similar processes to the journal review. Another option that the reviewers have available that I would like to mention is that from ASAP Bio, we are also encouraging the journal reviewers to post their reviews that they may do for the journal on the copy of the preprint if the journal that they are, if the article that they are reviewing has an associated preprint.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is that essentially the hard part in doing the review is actually doing the review and writing it, and the journal reviewers have already done the assessment and written the review. And it's only one extra step to be able to then post that publicly with the preprint. But it adds fantastic contextualization to that preprint. It enriches the preprint, and it allows the reviewer to make that review transparent, independent of whether the journal was going to make it transparent or not. So it's a way of, I would say, putting more control on the reviewer's hands as to whether they are willing to share that review with the community, make it transparent, and add it to the preprint.
Yeah, it's true. And I really like the journal, for instance, who publish the reviews with the article. And actually reading the reviews often is super instructive. So
absolutely. And it's also, to be one of the great benefits of that as well, is to have the proof that there has been peer review.
Yep.
Because sometimes we take it at face value.
Yep.
That's the that's the proof.
Yeah, definitely that would add some transparency and bring more ideas into the field. So let's do it for sure. But is there an easy way to do it currently?
In terms of publishing your reviews of
Yes.
papers, yes, I would say there are a number of ways. A very simple way would be to go to the preprint itself, and you can, as I mentioned, BioArchive, for example, has a commenting feature, so you could post it as a comment. And that would make it publicly visible to anyone who comes to the preprint, and again, it gets marked through the little dashboard. But that's not the only option available. There are now some platforms that allow you to post comments publicly. So a couple I will mention is one is a very nice platform called Pre-Review that essentially hosts reviews of preprints. And the interesting thing on Pre-Review is that one, they will assign a DOI to your review, so it's actually a citable object as well if you wanted to put it on your CV, etc. And also, the Pre-Review gives you the option to post your review in either anonymous manner or signed. It's up to you. And also, you can actually change your choice later if you want to first do it anonymous. So I would say those are a couple of possibilities, and then another platform that hasn't necessarily been used for this, but is perfectly compatible and can be used for this purpose as well, is PubPeer, where many people comment on journal articles, but PubPeer allows you to comment on any research paper. So it could be a preprint, and again, as you know, PubPeer, you can also post it anonymously if that's your choice.
It's very interesting. I mean, it's super cool to meet you because I never had this overview and see that actually there's a huge work done to make working the preprint better and better, and having a lot of initiative to feed some energy into this community of preprints. Super cool to meet you. I mean, I will have a look to the pre-review, to the PubPeer, to the review comment.
Fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. I will have a look. Yeah. And so maybe we would like to add one last point before we have to wrap up this podcast for time's sake. If you wanted to tell us one more thing or wrap up, or it's yours.
I think that one of the things that if I had to wrap up with one thing, it would be a reminder for researchers that preprints give you control of when you're ready to communicate your work. I think we work in a very complex system. Obviously, science is very complex, and science communication has also become quite complex. But I think that the communication of research, thanks to the technical tools that we have at our disposal today, doesn't need to be complex at all. Actually, that's one part of the system where we can reduce some of this complexity and try to keep things simple for researchers who are very busy people and should be spending their time doing the research. So I guess that the one thing that I always like to highlight is this element of, as a researcher, if you post your preprint, you are making, as I say, the choice is yours and you have the control. You can choose what to share. It doesn't need to be the big paper with 20-figure panels. You can share your preliminary data, negative results, confirmatory results, reanalysis, anything that you think is rigorously done and ready to share, you can share it. It's free, so there is no financial barriers to participate in this manner, to share it in this manner. And then importantly, you choose when to share this with the community. When you have something that you think is useful for the community to see, and if you want to choose the further path of journal publication, of course, that makes sense. It's valuable in itself. But by posting a preprint, again, you are making your own choices as to when to share your.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for this conclusion. It was great to have this chat with you. So I guess if you want to follow up or have more information of what we talked about, have a look on the ASAP Bio website. I guess you can also contact Irache Puebla.
Oh, please do.
Well, she's She's been really informative for this conference. I hope she'll do more. So to spread the good news that preprint is alive and that we can have the choice when to publish our data and what.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me and for supporting, again, these important conversations around how to communicate research.